casting on in pattern to make just a little neater edge. Now the first stitch I've cast on is already just that first loop, so that will be counted as my first knit. So of course my second stitch is the stitch that we all know and love. It's the traditional long tail cast on, where I go under the thumb, and you notice I've entered a stitch on the needle, and then by going over the finger yarn, I'm quite literally knitting one stitch. So if I can knit a stitch, I can purl a stitch. So there's my knit 2, and then I want to purl. So to purl, I need to insert the needle into the far side of the finger yarn. And notice that looks just like entering a stitch on the needle, because it is. And I go under the thumb yarn, and notice I've wrapped the yarn around the needle just the way I do when I purl, because I in fact am purling, and I push that loop through. And there's my purl 1. And then for me to cast on in pattern, I have knit 2, and here's another purl 1. So let's look at that again. Remember, when I purl, I need to insert the needle back to front into the fabric, which means when I purl, my yarn's in the front. So look at that. My thumb yarn is in the front, so I know that's going to be my ball of yarn. So if this is my ball of yarn, I know I need to enter one of the finger pieces of yarn. If I enter here, don't have a closed loop. If I go this way, I don't have a closed loop either. The only way to get a closed loop is go behind the far side of the finger and back up to make that loop. I've entered a stitch on my needle. I wrap the yarn around my thumb, and I push a loop through another loop. And there's my purl 1. And there's my knit 2. And let's look at that again. I'm going to have a purl 2. And I'll play this in slow motion for you for the next one. And then I have a knit 1. And let's slow this down. So there you go. This is again totally extra credit, but that's a fun way you can cast on in pattern. And I just want you to see one more thing while I finish casting on. If you pause for a second, like the phone rings and you lose track of where you are, what I want you to do is look directly. I'm going to try to focus this in a little more. Hold on. Sharpen up my focus. If you look directly at the tip of the needle, you can see right there that purl bump. So I can see that I've left off on a purl. You'll notice that looks very different than the knit. If I'm looking at the knit from the side, I might confuse that piece of yarn as a purl bump. But of course, if I pull that piece of yarn back and I look directly at the needle, you can see there I pull down, and you can see clear as day that V of a knit, which looks very different. Let me do one more purl, and we'll look at that again. Then looking right at the legs, and I pull down, and I can see there's that purl bump. So there you go, extra credit.